Welcome to Redacted Tonight VIP. I'm Lee Camp. Today I talk with the co-host of Rolling Stone's new podcast, Useful Idiots. She's also the host of the Katie Halper Show, and by some crazy coincidence, her name is Katie Halper. She's also an old friend of mine from my stand-up comedy days in New York City. Also coming up, Redacted Tonight correspondent Naomi Caravani brings an unbelievable story about colleges buying SAT scores. It's weirder than you think, but of course, it's all done in the pursuit of profit, so it's a good thing. But first, let's start by shredding some paper. All right, let's start with, this is incredible. So I've just set it up. A few months ago, RT America, the News with Rick Sanchez, the news show here on this channel, did some reporting on the health concerns of 5G wireless, the next wave of wireless technology that soon will be across our society and many nations around the world. And basically, the reporting just made clear, the reporting by the news show just made clear that 5G is pretty untested. Many scientists and doctors have grave concerns and just believe that it should be far more tested before it is shot through all of our bodies, not to mention animals, insects, plants, everything. Let's figure out what it does. That's all the reporting really did. And for doing that reporting, the New York Times came after them with a large expose titled, "Your 5G phone won't hurt you, but Russia wants you to think it will." Oh my God, this must be Drago from Rocky, right? Ah, Russians are gonna get you. Now, we'll ignore for a second that none of the reporting done was by Russians. Let's just ignore that. And at least not on Rick Sanchez's show. And we want we won't even spend that much time on the fact that now even one of the top scientific periodicals in the nation, Scientific American, says they have no reason to believe 5G is safe for you. They say quite clearly that even though the technology is coming, it's contrary to what people say, there could be health risks. There you go, Scientific American. So we won't even get into how royally New York Times fucked that up. But let's get into why the New York Times felt the need to write a giant hit piece defending 5G technology and declaring anyone who dare ask whether more testing needs to be done must be a Russian agent. See, now right now, the smart kids at home, you know the answer right now. A lot of you out there, you know what I'm about to say. Could it be that the New York Times gets some of their funding from a corporation connected to 5G technology? No, you would. That would be insane. Because if that were the case, that would be a massive conflict of interest in their reporting. That would be just a shitstorm of garbage reporting. They would never do that. Well, here is this week's New York Times. All right, this is from this Monday. Let's see what we find inside here. Let's flip just a few pages, okay? This is the second page of the New York Times from this week. Let's see. Giant 5G ad right there. A fourth of a page, all right? Giant 5G Verizon advertisement. A fourth. I can't even imagine how much that must cost. A fourth of their entire page. Honestly, it must be, what, $1 million? All right, let's go to the next page. Giant 5G Verizon ad, all right? Another fourth of the page. Let's go another page. Giant 5G Verizon advertisement. Let's go, one more page. Giant 5G Verizon advertisement. Oh, let's go another page. Giant 1/4 of a page 5G Verizon advertisement. Can you imagine how much fucking money did they dump into the New York Times in order to get that many ads? How much do you think? $1 million, $2 million, $10 million? I have no fucking clue, but it's a lot of money, okay? And so the idea that they should be like, 5G is totally fine, no testing needed, I don't know what everybody's talking about, and not mention that they are getting tons of money from Verizon, It's disgusting. It is a pathetic state of affairs for them to leave that out. Let's see. I want to do one more thing here. This is from this same New York Times. They're upset about Warren's new her tax plan on billionaires. Fewer billionaires under Warren's tax proposals, and they have a little chart here. How Warren's tax proposal could have affected the rich, or will affect the rich if she gets it in place, and they list each of the billionaires. Jeff Bezos would go from $160 billion, his wealth in 2018, down to $49 billion. Oh, how do you even get by? What's he gonna do? I don't know how he'll pull it off. Bill Gates, if Warren were in power, would have gone from a little less than $100 billion down all the way to $20 billion. He can't get by with that. Have you seen? He has at least 2-3 pets, a couple of kids. You can't. $20 billion. How could you scrape by? This chart is repulsive. It's meant to make people feel bad that, oh, these billionaires' wealth, the heroes of our society, would be decreased heavily. $1 billion is $1,000 million. That no one should have $1 billion. No one, okay? It's disgusting. It's repulsive. It is hoarders. It is sociopaths. No one should have that much money. No one can ever spend that much money. No one should need that much money. So this should just be a list of the horror shows of our society, and worrying that they might go from 60 billion to 20 billion. It's insane. It is insane, okay? That's all you should take away from this chart. All right, here now is my interview with the co-host of the podcast, Useful Idiots, with best-selling author Matt Taibbi. Who's also been on this show. She's also the host of the Katie Halper Show on WBAI, and the two of us spent many years performing comedy to 12 people in basements in New York City, and those 12 people were mildly confused. How far we've come, though. Except sometimes I still perform comedy in a basement. Here's my conversation with Katie Halper. Katie, thanks for joining me.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me.
Congrats on your awesome new podcast with Matt Taibbi, Useful Idiots. It's excellent. I want to get to Bernie Sanders and Tulsi Gabbard in a minute, but let's start with Bolivia. And I was just a second ago in a different segment, I was holding up this New York Times, but I didn't mention this headline, which is about Bolivia. It says, Bolivia's leader resigns. The end of tyranny. Is this the end of tyranny, Katie?
Is that an Onion headline?
That's the New York Times.
That's absurd. Yeah, you can see the entrance of democracy in the way that people are literally beating people on the streets. There's these, I don't know if you've seen the humiliating footage of this sadistic treatment of a female mayor who had paint thrown on her, was assaulted, had her hair cut off, which is a really disgusting, sadistic, kind of old school way to humiliate women.
Right, and that's been done by right-wing mobs, right?
Yes, right-wing mobs, right, who are the ones who are claiming to bring democracy to Bolivia and overthrow this tyrant. Now, a sign that you're not bringing the end of tyranny into a country is when you force the leader to escape, flee for his life, and even if there had been irregularities, which there weren't, and we can get into that, but even if there were, you let the person fulfill their term if you care about democracy, right? If you're such sticklers about process and democracy. And he has until December. But of course, he's gone because of the threats of violence and the actual violence, and his home was ransacked. Another sign that tyranny is entering, not exiting Bolivia.
Right, and the fact that they ran into the capital and declared it a Christian nation again doesn't exactly speak to freedom and freedom of religion.
Yeah. Yes, and they declared the end of Pachamama, which is this idea about like Mother Earth, basically. Yeah, they're very scary. I mean, they're not just your run-of-the-mill right-wing authoritarians. They're right-wing authoritarians with more than a pinch of Christianity, which is always a fun thing to add into it.
And the way our mainstream media is covering it, not just saying the end of tyranny, the tyranny of decreasing poverty by 50% and that kind of horrible tyranny, but they also aren't using the word coup. They're acting like the election was a fraud, and yet no proof has been shown, right?
Right. No, yeah. And of course, we saw this. We had a nice preview of this in Honduras, where there was a coup, and Hillary Clinton refused to call it a coup. And now Honduras has a booming femicide capital, has become a booming femicide capital. That's their, one of their industries. And they've become the murder, literally, it's called the murder capital of the world.
Yeah, it's very similar to what happened in Honduras. And the U.S., talk for a moment about which countries the U.S. decides are coups and which are not coups.
Right. So basically, a coup is when a government that the U.S. doesn't like either comes into power legally, that'll be a coup. But when it's actually a coup, the U.S. doesn't really like to call it that. When it's the overthrow of a government that the U.S. doesn't like.
Right. If it's kicking out a government that we're not fans of, that our government's not a fan of, then it is not a coup. And
right. It's democracy.
And I guess a lot of people are wondering, why is this not a country? Why is Bolivia a country that the United States is at odds with? Why? What is it that has upset our government and our intelligence agencies?
Right. Well, I mean, Evo Morales is part of the kind of pink wave of leftist, more democratic leaders in Latin America. And actually, it's interesting. Bolivia, like you said, he got rid of a lot of poverty. And he's the first indigenous, I think the only indigenous leader of that country. And that's has the biggest indigenous population of all of Latin America. So he's part of the kind of a group of presidents and leaders who won't bow down to the imperialism and the neoliberalism that the United States tries to impose on other countries. And he refused to cooperate with IMF and WTO things. And, they love to do their structural readjustment, which is where you're basically only get financial economic support if you do things like slash spending and slash public programs. So he was, he's like an uppity leader. To the United States.
Well said. And nationalizing the oil and gas is never something we're okay with.
No, yeah. Right. I mean, you can trace that back to Fidel Castro, right? That was the big thing that got the United States to hate Cuba. I mean, and the irony is, of course, sometimes like that. We can get into this, a whole other thing, but that's what really pushed Castro into to being a communist. And I'm not making a judgment either way, but he was more of a nationalist. And then when the United States started threatening him and targeting Cuba, that's what pushed him into the arms of the Soviet Union, ironically. But the United States has a kind of hysteria and is not rational. Sometimes they're rational in protecting their very short-term interests, and sometimes they just lose it, kind of.
Right, so, just endless anger. I'll be back in a moment with the rest of that interview, but take a second to make sure you're subscribed at youtube.com/redacted tonight. They unsubscribe people all the time, so double check. You can also get every episode online for free at pluto.tv. That's the website, channel 279 on that website. Okay, I'll be back with the rest of that interview and a lot more. Welcome back. I'm still Lee Camp. Let's return to my interview with comedian, journalist, and radio host Katie Halper. I want to move on to something else you've covered recently, the Jeffrey Epstein story, which has basically just been dropped from our mainstream media. There was a fervor for it for a month, and now it's just gone, as if his death, while all the guards at the prison fell asleep and the cameras all stopped working, made a lot of sense, and now it's time to move on. What are your thoughts?
Well, we saw the ABC anchor, right, Amy Robach, complain about how her bosses wouldn't let her broadcast that story. This was leaked footage from ABC where she was on the hot mic, but not obviously delivering the news. And she talks about how they had this interview and that interview, and her bosses were basically saying, we can't do that because we won't have access to, Kate and Will, Prince Harry. I can't keep track with all that weird, like inbred royal family. But anyway, they wouldn't have access to the royal family if they went after the Epstein story, because of course that involves royal family member Prince Andrew. And that was kind of an incredible thing to see. And we've seen a real weaponization of conspiracy theories. People will say things, and we saw this with the Hillary Clinton clip on The Daily Show, but people really like dismissing things that are actually true as conspiracy theory. And that does a couple of things. It kind of tries to discredit the actual narrative and the actual argument and points being made. But it also, there's a real attempt to marginalize people as toxic, as tinfoil hat wearers, as loony, as not trustworthy. And it's a really scary thing. And then, of course, it has the self-censoring aspect to it because people don't want to be branded as that. And people don't want to have their careers ruined by being called a conspiracy theorist. I mean, you know this as well as anyone because of the way you're treated by the media, by some media, right? By, I would say, the corporate media.
Yeah.
And how, it's just, wonderful to see.
Well, speaking of that,
Terrible.
and you mentioned it, you played on your podcast. Well, I guess you have a video version of it as well. You played the amazing clip of Hillary Clinton on The Daily Show, and Trevor Noah asks her about Epstein in such a way that it just can all be laughed off. He sets her up to basically get beyond it, and just as anyone who asks any questions is an insane conspiracy theorist. Because the Daily Show's job is largely to make the Democratic side of the ruling elite feel comfortable, like they're always the good guys. So,
right.
and I don't think you know where I'm going with this, but seeing as you and I both came up in the same stand-up comedy circles in New York City, at what point in your life did you realize you weren't right for the Daily Show?
It's interesting. I actually have some articles that I wrote that I'm gonna have to burn in a bonfire or something. Where when I was a little more centrist, my politics haven't changed that much, but I feel like the world around me did, and so the way I kind of interacted with that world has changed. But I don't know. I mean, I think that one of the best things the Daily Show did do was Jon Stewart on Israel was one of the best things that came out of the Daily Show. I mean, this was someone who actually critiqued the U.S. policy towards Israel and critiqued Israeli policy. But yeah, besides that, I mean, basically every late show has become a way to try to make corny jokes about how much Trump sucks. And, you don't have to be a Trump fan to think that that's not effective resistance, and also to think that there are other stories that need to be covered. And the thing that Trevor Noah did that was so kind of disturbing is that he jokingly asked Hillary Clinton how she killed Epstein, which no one thinks that Hillary Clinton actually killed Epstein, but Hillary Clinton's husband, Bill Clinton, did fly around on the Lolita Express. That's not a conspiracy theory. We know that. It's in the logs, right? And so what happens is you kind of shoehorn all of that stuff together. So once you say, how did you kill Epstein, and that's obviously not true, it sheds this conspiracy theory pall on the actual things that happen. And Trevor Noah really should not be joking about the travels that Bill Clinton took on this rape plane. Right. It's not funny, and it's really disrespectful and offensive to the victims of Epstein. I mean, this was a major predator who raped lots of young women and provided other men with opportunities to rape other young women. And watching Hillary Clinton and Chelsea Clinton, now, to be honest, I expect that from them because they are very opportunistic and they constantly hide behind the vast right-wing conspiracy. And of course there was that, which is why they're able to use it so much. They just use it for cover no matter what the critique is. So when there's a really valid critique, they pretend that that's part of the vast right-wing conspiracy. And I guess I should expect it from Trevor Noah too, but it's really disturbing. I mean, he's providing cover for, and Bill Clinton, by the way, I believe Juanita Broderick, who accused Bill Clinton of raping her, forcibly raping her in a hotel room, and I've interviewed her. And I don't like her politics, but guess what? Doesn't matter. That's another, because you have a lot of Clinton defenders using her politics to discredit her.
Right, absolutely. I mean, it is well known and proven and not a conspiracy theory that he was on this plane many times and several of those times got rid of his Secret Service, and this plane was known for having underage girls who were being sex trafficked around the world by Jeffrey Epstein. So it's all of that is in the papers, it's in the facts, and you know, Trevor Noah exaggerates it in order to just laugh it off.
Right.
What did you find when you had Broderick on your show?
Oh, well, it's interesting. The most interesting thing about my discussion with Juanita Broderick is hearing how, and this is a similar phenomenon. So Juanita Broderick is now a Trump supporter. And the reason she's a Trump supporter is because the liberal feminist world that should have embraced her because she was talking about being raped by a very powerful man turned their backs on her. So what happens? You have nowhere to go on the left, and then Trump very opportunistically, and it's not like he's an anti-rape crusader, obviously. He did it for political reasons, but he embraced her, and then the same liberal feminist who refused, and I'm a feminist, but the same liberal feminist who refused to embrace her then point to her being a Trump supporter to discredit her. And of course, they're part of the reason that she's a Trump supporter. She met Bill Clinton volunteering on his campaign. She's not a particularly political person, but she liked him, his campaign in Arkansas. She was a nurse. She had a lot of issues about like insurance and the treatment of her patients in nursing homes, because she owned a nursing home. And she voted for Bush, but she also voted for Obama. Not in the primary, in the general. So, these people have really shoved her into this right-wing corner, and then they use that to not listen to her. And it's, believe women unless they are making accusations against people I like. That's the asterisk.
So, since you brought up Trump, I want to get in a question about him, so we don't let him off the hook. I mean, we all know he's corrupt. We all know he's giving massive giveaways to corporations, the wealthiest Americans, all of that. But this week, that is not what he's being impeached for. He's being impeached for relatively standard bending of another country to do what America wants after Biden bragged about doing something pretty similar. What are your thoughts on the whole Trump impeachment process?
I mean, it's funny. I had Shahid Buttar, who's running against Nancy Pelosi. Matt Taibbi and I had him on Useful Idiots, our podcast this week. And he is a constitutional lawyer, and he has great politics. He got arrested for challenging Clapper. He is very principled when it comes to kind of surveillance and civil liberties and civil rights. And his argument is that Trump should be impeached because of the emoluments clause. And his argument is that there's so many things that Trump did that we can impeach him on or can try to impeach him on, but this isn't one of the, I'm talking for myself, because he made a very convincing legal case for it. Of course, I think that, George Bush should have been impeached because of war crimes.
Right.
And this narrative that Trump is this total aberration, and this narrative that, I miss the good old days when George Bush was president, so he could kill all these innocent Iraqis and U.S. soldiers and create basically ISIS. That nostalgia for something that people don't even realize helped create Trump,
right,
is really disturbing. And, the thing with the impeachment of Trump is that if people wanted to go after Trump, there are lots of ways to do that. And this way is just a way that doesn't excite the base and it doesn't convert anyone. And I think we have to do both of those things, and we can do both of those things. And if you really care about getting rid of Trump, and you really care about the victims of Trumpism, you go with the resistance tactics that will actually excite people and bring people over to our side.
Yeah, and ironically, in this pursuit of this impeachment, they also reveal the impeachment of Joe Biden. The corruption of Joe Biden and the Democratic
Party. Yeah, of course, and that's something that, people notice that. People see that. They see, why is Donald Trump not allowed to talk to foreign leaders about something, but Joe Biden is allowed to get his son on the board of a foreign company and, in Ukraine where he knows nothing about it. And there's another dangerous thing that we see, just like there's this weaponization of conspiracy theory, there's a real weaponization of Trump criticism. So if you don't criticize Trump on everything, and guess what? Sometimes bad people do the right thing.
Right.
That's just how politics work. And watching people who are upset that he that he was nice to Kim Jong-un, and this neoliberal narrative, it is kind of brain rot. They're basically saying Trump is this unprecedented existential threat, Cheeto Mussolini with dementia.
Yeah.
And at the same time, they would like him to ratchet things up with foreign leaders that they say are evil or brain damaged.
We have 1 minute left, and I wanted to ask you about Tulsi Gabbard. You also had her on the show. And she's being now called a Russian asset by Hillary Clinton, ironically.
Right.
But what was that like?
It was great talking to her. Again, I don't agree with every single thing that any politician does or says.
Right.
Maybe with the exception of Bernie Sanders. But, we see that certain things you're allowed to be kind of heretical on certain things, and you're not allowed to be heretical on other things. Or I should say you're allowed to kind of not toe the party line on certain things, or you're allowed to lie, right? You're allowed to get something wrong, like the Iraq War. And of course, Hillary said that she was an asset, which was hilarious because it sounds like a spy novel. And if her definition of being an asset is helping, either wittingly or unwittingly helping another country, then there are a lot of Israeli assets in our government, including Hillary Clinton.
Seriously, a lot of people taking a lot of money from Israel or Saudi Arabia or.
And talking about our special relationship with that country. In the case of Israel, I always say that Israel is like America's wife and Saudi Arabia is America's mistress, because we brag about our relationship with Israel, and that's all very public and exposed, and then we keep Saudi Arabia on the DL. And both of those countries are, have terrible human rights records.
Well, yeah, but Saudi Arabia is very good in bed, so what choice do we have? Thank you so much, Katie. The podcast
Thanks
is
so much, Lee.
Useful Idiots. The radio show is Katie Halper Show. And the person is also Katie Halper. Thanks again.
Thanks.
We now turn to yet another college admissions scandal. But this time, it's not the parents' fault. The College Board, which is the national organization that administers standardized tests across the country, has been selling students' test results and personal data to schools who then use it to scam students even further. Here to report is Redacted correspondent Naomi Caravan.
The SAT test. The reason why teens learn those big words like veracity, tenacity, and Adderall. The most important word to learn today, however, is scam. According to a Wall Street Journal investigation, elite schools are purposefully advertising directly to students with lower SAT scores, who, when they apply, are rejected. But what's wrong with giving some desperate kids hope with the dream of an Ivy League education and then crushing that hope like a watermelon under a truck? So these rejects have nothing to do but sell branded t-shirts that say reject. These rejections have helped schools inflate their applicant pools and rejection rates. Colleges rise in national rankings when they show data suggesting they're more selective. They can do that by rejecting more applicants, whether or not those candidates ever stood a chance. Prestige and exclusivity are so important. Like going out on the town, you don't want to go to a dive bar where your high school friends are. You want to go to an exclusive nightclub, like the Berghain in Berlin, where they turn people away for wearing shorts or sneakers or gray hair. You want to go to a club where barely anyone gets in, unless they say their father's inside. That's probably how that bald guy got in there. Let's be real. So while the number of students admitted stayed the same at Vanderbilt and Harvard, the pool of applicants doubled in the past decade. Some students receive hundreds of pamphlets from colleges, which makes those schools look a little bit thirsty, and someone should tell them it's not very cute. These colleges target these prospective rejects by buying the optimistic teens' addresses and SAT data from the College Board. You know the College Board, the nonprofit that administers the test and sells between 2 and 2.5 million names of sorry suckers a year. I mean, prospective college students a year. To find more students to solicit, admissions officers can turn to College Board, which sells lists of high school students' names, ethnicities, parents, education, and approximate PSAT or SAT scores at 47 cents a name. It's 10 o'clock. Do you know where your children's names and addresses are? Not to worry, they've been sold to almost 2,000 schools hoping to scam them for application fees and boosting their prestige up their hopes and dreams. You'd think that the College Board wouldn't need that money, considering they also take hefty fees for taking the test, and the number of people taking the test is ever expanding. Since in 2015, the College Board allowed 8th graders to start taking the PSAT. How far will they go? Will we have toddlers one day in daycare calling peekaboo intermittent discernments of incredulity? In 2017, College Board's revenue was $1.1 billion, according to its most recent tax returns, up from $760 million in 2012. The nonprofit generated $140 million in profits in 2017 and reported more than $1 billion in assets. Not only does the organization not pay taxes, The College Board also receives public subsidies, leading some to ask, does the College Board deserve public subsidies? False. That's obviously the answer. College Board is to grift as Giuliani is to self-incriminate. The program is called Student Search Service, and schools and the College Board say the program is intended to diversify the student body. And if you think this is problematic, so do parents. And in Illinois, there has been some legal challenges. But College Board says it licenses rather than sells students' names because schools may only use the data for a prescribed period. The College Board isn't selling your kids' data. It's renting out your children's hopes and dreams, like a studio apartment where strangers can do weird sex stuff, or a tiny Fiat car, also where strangers can do weird sex stuff. Smaller strangers. Steam clean everything. See, every aspect of the college application process is monetized, from the test prep to the test to the application to the tuition, and now even the names and addresses on the tests. And this nonprofit is finding more and more opportunities for profit. I wouldn't be surprised if College Board bought those reject t-shirts in bulk and started to sell them at a markup to kids who were actually rejected. Oh, what's this? An invitation to apply to MIT. It's about time they recognize my talent. It's due on November 30th. That is, carry the one. Yeah, I'm gonna need a calculator for this. Reporting from Harvard University, this is Naomi Caravani, Redacted tonight.
That's the show, but I'll be in New York City this coming week for a free panel on breaking down propaganda. Details are at redactedtour.com, and you can vote for your city to be added to my tour dates, also at redactedtour.com. Until next time, good night, and keep fighting.